Today on LA Currents, nothing beats the LA Zoo. It's close by, fun for kids of all ages, and it is host to so many great exhibits and programs. And for the first time ever, the zoo has a conservation strategic plan. Next, she was born in India. She's an urban planner, a Harvard grad, and activist, as well as being the first woman to represent Council District 4. But up first, since 1981, LAPD Chief Michael Moore has received numerous commendations and awards for his service. We talk with him about policing that reflects LA's shared values, communicating with the public, and effective enforcement of the law. Well, almost 9,500 sworn personnel, almost 3,000 civilian personnel, and the man at the helm for the last 3 years has been Chief Michael Moore. It's so nice to be in your office.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for being here, and it's a great opportunity.
What are some of the changes that have happened since you've been at the helm, and what are some of the things that you walked into and you realized these are good foundational things that we need to keep in place?
We're in good shape. I inherited a department that was reform-minded. It was referenced in the then President Obama's 21st century policing reforms, and the pillars that were there, showcased what LAPD was doing for building trust in communities, for community engagement, for being problem solvers, but recognizing that we have a shared responsibility for public safety, and that also on the enforcement, that it was smart, that it was focused, it was data informed. So that's what I inherited. So we set on a course of continued reform and continued work to lessen the instances of use of force, particularly deadly force, to improve our efforts of dealing with persons experiencing mental illness, to really be a part of the solution for persons experiencing homelessness, both for providing them services and support, but also improving the safety and the sense of safety of communities in which these homeless encampments and persons who are living in public places that they're wrestling with.
So the community policing, I know that program was in place. I would imagine that it's actually ramped up. And how is it going at this moment in time?
Well, community policing in Los Angeles is the entire organization. It's institutionalized. It's institutionalized across every aspect of what we do. There's a community safety partnership, which was and is an effort within 10 of our communities, most impacted by violent crime, historic distrust of the police, and a police response in the past that was bring more officers, bring more enforcement as a means of restoring order and lessening the loss of life and the instances of violence. And Chief Beck, along with Connie Rice and others, came with a concept of rather than implying more enforcement, how do we build and strengthen those communities through supporting them and working in a partnership and a shared responsibility of bringing city services, of bringing needed resources so that the safety of those communities is improved, the confidence of those communities in themselves and their ability to deal with disorder and minor acts of discord can be resolved other than resorting to arrest, other than resorting to a police presence. So that community safety partnership across those 10 areas which we've studied and seen that reduces violent crime, improves public trust, and reduces arrests and use of force, that has continued. It's not window dressing, it's not fringe. This is a key component of how we're going to learn as an organization how to enculturate in us the values that we see.
Along those lines, you had a budget crisis that has now somewhat abated in terms of what we believe the economics of Los Angeles is. Is that going to help you in this coming year, and are you looking forward to being able to replace a lot of those positions that no longer were able to be replaced last year and move
Right.
some of these positive programs forward?
Yes, so I'm grateful for the federal relief monies that came to the city that allowed the city to begin to restore some of its basic operations. The core function of city government is public safety.
Right.
And in this instance, with President Biden's bill, his stimulus package that came to the city, it allowed the city to do two things. First, it allowed it to pay back its debt and establish a responsible reserve, because we're an earthquake away from a natural disaster
Right.
that matches this pandemic. Secondly, it allowed it to begin investing in core services such as policing. So we have begun our first class after nearly 6 months without one. Our effort, and this is to all the members who are watching this, we're hiring. We hope to hire 740 personnel, recruits, qualified individuals to become the next generation of LA police officers.
So much good news, but there are some things to deal with, and you mentioned that the rising level of crime, could be very directly related to the issues of the pandemic, but also the prisoners that have been released, and so there's some controversy about who's doing what, why they're doing it, how it's affecting the public at large, how it's affecting the law enforcement and the judicial system. Is there any kind of move forward with any kind of cooperative? I know that there's even some controversy amongst those in our criminal justice system here in Los Angeles and our law enforcement. There's some differing of opinions that sometimes get vocal and sometimes obviously have trickled down. I'm trying to be very kind about all of this.
Very diplomatic.
Okay, but you know exactly what I'm saying.
I think I have an understanding.
Okay, so what is going on there, and how are we faring with it, and what are the moving forward steps that are being taken?
Well, first of all, the criminal debate, dialogue, discord about the criminal justice system is not something that just brought about by the pandemic. This is, as a state, as a region, we've, I think, led the country in criminal justice reform many times with highly, with grand ambition and very desired outcomes. We want to see justice. We want to see victims that are protected. We want to see consequences for those that harm others and victimize others. But we also want to see that people who commit offenses, how do we rehabilitate them? How do we bring them back into society? And then when they're reintroduced into society, how do we keep them on a good path? A sense that people can go out and commit crimes with little regard. Right. It's real. It's palpable. Now, this is not to indict anyone or meant to embarrass. It's instead to say, but how do we go forward? So this is constantly an evolution of what's working, what's not working, and that's what LAPD's, I think, how we've done so well over time, is we recognize it's not about blame, it's about the evolution. Sometimes things you should be able to anticipate, things that you can't, but what are we doing about it? Let's talk about today, let's talk about going forward. That's our responsibility to the people of the city.
And along those lines, you have this bird's eye view, and you also have this big picture vision because of the people that you interact with and the meetings that you're in and even the conversations that you could have. But on the other side of that, you also have your rank and file.
I do.
How are they feeling, and what are you saying to them?
Part of that is as a chief, is making sure that our people feel supported, and we're trying, and our command staff. But also recognizing that, reminding them that part of this emotion, part of this is because people are so hurt. And they're so injured by not just the pandemic, but by wrongs that exist in our society. And they don't have to shoulder that, but yet they do, because they wear this badge, they wear this uniform. And so, say hello to an officer. And we've seen 100 of our people, 100 of them chose to leave this organization, and many of them chose to leave the profession. That's a grievous injury. But when they leave the profession entirely, the profession loses and our communities lose.
But it can't be easy to be an officer.
This is one of the most difficult periods of time. It's unfair, it's not right to hear people express hate and just tremendous anger, and to center it on individuals, to center it on a profession of service, deeply disturbing. So this is brand new ground, and we've seen the calls to our psychologists and our peer support, our clergy, go through the roof. And it sets the stage for who's coming to, how fertile is the ground for people to come to this profession. It signals that, this is not an automatic that people want to be cops, that they want to get into this turmoil and face a very turbulent existence, and to be criticized, and to have their families criticized, and to have their families face open ridicule in public places, in schools, and in churches, and in houses of worship, and other places. So with that, though, we've got to take a step back and take a deep breath and build with them, that remind them of why they chose this profession. Remind them of why it matters. There are 4 million people in the city, and they depend on this department. We're an organization committed to the people of the city, and we're going to show them why this is the greatest department in American policing.
Dr. Jake Owens spent 5 years in China saving pandas from extinction. Now, as the first director of conservation, he joins us to give the inside scoop on LA Zoo's game plan to protect wildlife across the globe. The practical definition of a zoo, if you look it up in the dictionaries, is a facility in which animals are confined within enclosures, displayed to the public, and which they may also be bred. I think things are changing, are they not? Or am I mistaken that zoos seem to be moving away from just that one mission and expanding a mission to be far more supportive to animals around the world?
You know, we have these animals here at the zoo so that people come in and they support the conservation work. So that's, from my perspective, a big point of those animals that are here at the zoo. We have Asian elephants, they're you know, very endangered, and so we have a long history of engagement in Asian elephant conservation.
Right.
Indian Garil. Garil are these crocodilians. They're longest crocodiles, so they get about 20 feet long. They get these really narrow snout for catching fish, but there are fewer than 700 of them left. They live in northern India. So we actually work with two groups there, Madras Crocodile Bank Trust and Wildlife Trust of India on their conservation, and so increasing that. But there are species, obviously, the need is really great.
The City of Los Angeles is proud to launch the first ever LA Zoo Conservation Strategic Plan.
Just recently launched an initiative, which is a very, very bold conservation initiative.
We took the time to develop this really strong plan, and we've got 6 key focal areas.
Okay.
So that's social and environmental justice, California conservation, human and wildlife coexistence, illegal wildlife trade, evidence-based conservation, and reintroduction or conservation translocations. So there's these 6 key focal areas that we have decided, based on a variety of reasons, that we need to really hone in on and focus on because of the strengths of the zoo, the strengths of the city, our location in California, Los Angeles, and a variety of other reasons. And the, you know, a big focus for the last year globally has been the kind of social outcry about inequality, and that's actually really tied to conservation and conservation success. And a lot of conservation has realized this over the last decade or so, and so we're focusing on these key areas, but there's also this thread of, you know, remembering humans in conservation that kind of goes throughout.
So let's pull all this back to LA. How is that going to impact this region and what people benefit from here with the LA Zoo?
I'm most excited about our commitment to California conservation because there's so much to do and so many great partners to help bring together. And so the first key initiative on this is called the Griffith Park Conservation Consortium. There are already a lot of great groups working in Griffith Park on its conservation or engagement with local communities and nature. What we want to do is help to bring that together into a single, really well-designed structure so that over time we can say, okay, who's doing what? What's the action steps that are going to get to their end goal? How are we measuring that? And that we all know what's going on, and it's very transparent and collaborative. And so if they need, you know, this group is working on, say, raptor nest surveys, how can we help support that? We've got experts, you know, birders and raptor people at the zoo. Can they help support that work? Or maybe it's connecting people with nature. That's something that Rec and Parks is really engaged in. How do we, you know, increase accessibility of Griffith Park to local communities?
How long is this initiative scheduled for?
This is a 5-year plan, so 2021 to 2026. And that's the starting. And part of the plan is we've focused on California conservation, and especially Los Angeles, is to make people aware that this is something that we're doing, that we have the capacity to do it if they partner with us. I'm hoping that we can change the perception of the zoo, if people really understand the conservation value of the zoo, both to them and future generations and globally, so that the next 5-year period we can do even more ambitious things.
A lot of people do know about the California condor and the fact that it was a success story, but I had no idea about some of the other things that you're mentioning right now. I would imagine as part of what you're trying to do is not just necessarily do it, offer it, and have people involved, but to let people know that it's happening.
People might have an understanding of California condors and their recovery in some way, but they might not know this really integral role that the zoo has played in it. Every year we breed several individuals, it ranges maybe 5 to 10 individuals every year, and then release them out into the wild. And so you had 0 condors in the wild in the late 1980s, and now you've got over 300, which it's really remarkable. And the funny thing for me is that I'd speak to somebody at a conference in China or a conference in Southeast Asia or something, saying like, oh yes, I work at the LA Zoo, and they know the condor program. And I'll talk to people in Los Angeles, and they have no idea that the LA Zoo was even a part of that, which is pretty amazing to me. And for me, it's kind of sad, because like this is part of your legacy too. As an Angelino, this is your legacy of your zoo saving a species from extinction. It's not the only one.
I've never said this out loud to anybody who would care, but maybe you will. I think about the fact that there are how many billions of people in the world, there are how many millions of people in Los Angeles, and you're talking about now there are hundreds of condors out there. That balance is really untenable, I would think, in so many ways, especially for someone like you. That the quantification of this must be incredibly, at once terrifying and motivating at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. You think about, Asian elephants, right? That's a good example for Los Angeles. And there are roughly 40,000, somewhere between 20,000 and 50,000 Asian elephants that exist in the wild in these 13 different range countries that they live in. And you think, 40,000, that's a lot. But, you're talking about one small neighborhood in Los Angeles of people. For a species, 40,000, you get a disease. Obviously we've got disease on our mind right now because of this pandemic. You get one disease that wipes through the Asian elephant population, you're going to lose all of them, in a very short period of time.
You started in July of 19, and then, ta-da, March of 2020, nobody's going anywhere.
Yeah.
Plus the fact that animals can get COVID. So how did the animals at the zoo fare, and how are we looking on the other side of this, if we are on the other side of this, slightly walking on, and what can people experience now?
So, fortunately, we have a really fantastic animal health and animal care team. Obviously, we shut down for most of last year. Some of the animals, they really missed people. It's very interesting. There's one Andean condor called Lead Bottom, and every time that I'd walk past his enclosure, I'd say hi. He'd hop over and do his mating display. And he doesn't do that now when people are back, and he doesn't do that, didn't do that before. No, he's done it to a lot of people, and he was like, oh, sweet, a person. This is really great. Other animals didn't seem to care, that much. Now that we've reopened, obviously the zoo is open for visitors, and they can come and enjoy everything the zoo has to offer. But we're still obviously very concerned about both the health of our animals and the health and well-being of the people who work there and visit there. So there are still, recommendations about social distancing now inside. Obviously, wearing masks is part of the rules of coming to the zoo, just to keep everybody safe. But also, it's a really particular situation because we have animals, and those animals can get COVID, and we don't know, how susceptible a lot of them are and how strong they'll be impacted by it. So really, it's just being as cautious as possible for everybody.
People interacting with animals in the wild. You're talking about bears, you're talking about even moving elephants, but we do have wild animals here in Los Angeles because of a number of reasons. They make it close to residential areas. If in fact you see an animal, what's the worst thing you can do?
The worst thing you can do is go to approach it. Animals, for the most part, in a good setting, they have no interest in interacting with a human. It's often that there's some bad setting, whether that's they don't have the resources that they need, they can't find the food that they need because the habitat's not there. And so, for example, a big one that I talk with people a lot about is coyotes. You see coyotes all the time now in Los Angeles. I walk my dog, I've seen coyotes plenty of times, and I've never had a negative interaction with a coyote. There's almost no recorded attacks of coyotes on people. It's almost always dogs or something like that. So the best thing you can do is pick your dog up and leave. Make a lot of noise. There was a good example last year of a guy getting chased by a mountain lion, and it was a mountain lion that had cubs, and she was trying to scare him out, and he made a lot of noise and kept his eyes on her and moved away for a few miles, and eventually she left. So that's the best you can do. Leave them alone. Don't interact. Don't feed them. That's definitely a no-no. And be respectful and keep your distance.
Next, prior to entering politics, Councilwoman Nithya Raman founded the homelessness nonprofit Time's Up Entertainment. We have a conversation with this newest member of the LA City Council about her current goals for her district and the challenges that lie ahead. Well, LA District Number 4 is one of the most unusually shaped districts in Los Angeles, from Koreatown, Mid-Wilshire, Sherman Oaks, Miracle While. It's a very eclectic council district, and the newest member of the LA Council, as well as the first woman to represent Council District 4, is here with us today. I'm delighted to have with me Nithya Raman. So wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me today.
One of the challenges, and it's definitely been top of mind and definitely been something that you are focusing on very sincerely, is homelessness. So where do things stand at this moment in time?
When the city has responded to homelessness in the past, what has happened in LA is that there's been 15 different approaches under 15 different council districts. There are no walls between my district and another district, and especially with my district, with how weird and I border with so many other districts. And I think having that coordinated approach is absolutely essential. One of the things that we're doing right now is that we are partnering actively with Council District 2 in the Valley to actually take on some of the challenges related to encampments that are not just near those borders, but are actually on those borders exactly. And to say, what can we contribute from District 4, what can we contribute from District 2? And I'm hoping that we can do that not just with Council District 2, but with all of the council districts that we border. But I think more importantly, we need a citywide approach. We need to think about this issue as not just every council member doing their own thing, but really to have a process that we follow across the city. That kind of coordinated, thoughtful, citywide approach, that's really something that we're pushing for from our office.
Well, and I do need to ask you, based on that citywide approach, there was a vote taken, and you were one of 2 dissenting votes in regards to what was going to happen with specific areas that encampments needed to be removed from or moved from. Why did you choose to vote against, knowing full well that the majority of the council was feeling one way? And the mayor has since signed. And then how can you work with everybody after?
So I think the reason I voted against that particular ordinance, or the version of the ordinance that was being put forward at this moment, was exactly because of this 15 different approaches version. The way the ordinance is structured now, it's based on an action of an individual council member to identify areas or encampments for intervention. And to me, that's exactly the wrong approach. As I said earlier, we need to be thinking about how we prioritize as a city, not every council member for their own. And so for me, that vote was really a vote for better. I want better policies. I want more thoughtful policies. And I know we can have them here. I know all 15 of us can get together and talk about it and get it right. I did not feel that this version was it.
Has anyone actually walked up and done a person-to-person, what is it that you want your life to look like off the streets? And what are you willing to do to make this happen? Instead of the outside coming in telling everyone what to do, how can we help you? What is it that you want? What are we doing that you don't want us to do? What is it that you're willing to do in partnership with us to make this road move towards a better life for you and for the entire city?
Thank you for that question. I think that question really speaks to why I think outreach is such an essential component of how we move us towards actually ending homelessness in Los Angeles. Because I think it is exactly that kind of ability to ask an individual what they need and trying to match them with the resources that they need that will actually help us get out of this crisis. When you have someone who says, I really, really want to go inside, but I have my partner with me, and I've never been offered a facility where I can stay with my partner, that's when you can find them that location that will get them off the street. When you have someone who says, I would really love to go inside, but I have my support animal that I've had with me for years that has helped me through thick and thin, then the outreach worker can actually find a place where they can take that support animal with them. And I think that is the kind of fine-grained work that we absolutely need to be doing in order to address this crisis.
So you're new to the council, but that's not the fact that you are new to very dramatic and overwhelming issues that are not just here in Los Angeles, but in the world. You spent several years in India. You were really focused on taking looks at areas that may or may not be recognized to the rest of the world with, in Delhi and Chennai. What did you see there in terms of social problems, people in poverty that you learn from, or that you realize that our problems are much more solvable? What did you learn there that you bring to the table?
Yeah, so I worked in Delhi and in Chennai for many years. I worked on urban poverty issues. So I've worked on urban poverty issues for almost my entire career. And so there is that linkage going from one place to the other. But I think there's also ways of thinking about these issues that I think I've brought from one context into another. One of the reasons that I worked in India in the way that I did, so I'm an urban planner by training, and a lot of the work that I did in India was about getting accurate data about slums, about informal settlements where there were no access to basic services like running water or toilets. And one of the reasons why I really pushed for accurate mapping, for community surveys, for tools that could identify those needs was because I knew that with better data, with visibility for those communities, that their needs could be taken into account by municipal governments there. In a way, that push to think about whose voices are not being heard or which data is not being considered really was the push behind me running for office in the first place.
Well, along with the problems, the challenges, and the work, there are some really fun things that are part of your district. You have a lot of the tourist destinations too. So how are things, outside of the long haul issues? How are things in the district at large, and what are some of the other things that you're celebrating or working on?
Well, so one of the things I'm really excited about now is that people are having block parties again, people are having summer events again, and I'm hoping that we can keep doing those, especially the outdoor events. And so I've been really, really excited to be able to attend neighborhood block parties and tree giveaways at farmers markets and things that actually bring the community together now that it's actually safer to do that, especially outside. I'm also really excited that we do have a number of these really big tourist attractions, particularly in the mid-city area. We have LACMA, which is undergoing this big renovation. We also have, in that same location, the Purple Line coming in. And so we're going to see really big changes in that part of the city that are going to invite so many more people into it and that are really going to transform, I think, how those neighborhoods feel as gateways into Los Angeles. And I'm really, really excited to be partnering with all of those big institutions and with Metro to say, let us build a future here in these neighborhoods that reduces the need for cars to be coming into it, that limits traffic, and that really enables people to access these spaces on foot, on train, and really thrive in those spaces.
All right, so my last question, 6 months in, a little over 6 months.
Yeah.
Is it what you expected, different than what you expected, more than what you expected, or as you expected?
I think because I came in during COVID, and because I came in during a very unique time in Los Angeles history, the mayor just announced that he's taking another job even before his term is up. I think that this moment is a really special one in LA. I don't think I could have envisioned what it would be like. But I will say that I turned 40 last week on Wednesday. And
well, happy birthday. And congratulations on admitting it.
Thank you. And I will say that I woke up in the morning and really felt so humbled and privileged to be doing this work at this time, because there is really no greater privilege than being able to serve Los Angeles and to be able to serve my constituents in this way. There's nothing better.
All right. Well, best of all things. It's not an easy road, but you seem to be very motivated to walk it, so congratulations.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks. And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.